Part 28. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 271. Phew. Suddenly, a black figure appeared in the darkness of the palace. A pair of blood-red eyes stared closely at the scene and said with a ferocious smile, "You really enjoy it? It's a pity that your head will fall to the ground later, hum." Then the black figure pulled out the two double knives on his back. Just as he was about to take action, there was a burst of panicked footsteps outside the palace. Your Majesty, I have something important to report." Outside the palace, the voices of Guanglong and Prime Minister Chopin came, and their tone was a little anxious, as if they were afraid of something happening. Hearing this, Ji Kai, who was enjoying Luo Binglan's massage, raised his eyebrows and said lazily, "Come in." Upon hearing this, the two men quickly opened the palace door and walked in cautiously. Seeing Ji Kai sitting on a chair and enjoying Luo Binglan's massage, the two of them lowered their heads, leaned over and said, "Your Majesty." Ji Kai nodded, looked at the two of them with half-squinted eyes and asked, "What's the matter, dears? I have never seen you so anxious." After hearing the question, the two of them couldn't help but look at Luo Binglan, who was behind Ji Kai. His expression was hesitant to speak, and the meaning was already very obvious. Seeing this scene, Luo Binglan's beautiful eyes moved behind her, and she leaned into Ji Kai's ear and said, "Your Majesty, as a member of the harem, I will not listen to these court affairs. I will retire first." "Why?" Ji Kai was indeed a little reluctant. He held Luo Binglan's hand as he was about to leave, then raised his eyes to look at the two of them and said, "If you have anything to say, just tell me here. My emperor's empress is not an outsider." After hearing this, the two looked at each other, nodded, and said nothing more. Then Xiao Bang told Ji Kai exactly what Qin Feng said just now. After a few breaths, Ji Kai's originally comfortable face showed some displeasure. He frowned, raised his eyes and looked at the two of them and asked, "Is this true?" Hearing this, Chopin nodded heavily and replied. Hearing his empress speak, Ji Kai did not hesitate any longer. Looking at the two of them, he nodded solemnly and said, "Okay, in that case, I will leave the palace." Hearing this, Qin Feng frowned and said thoughtfully, "Don't let your guard down, this demon race must be looking for an opportunity." Then he quickly left the palace. Then several people left the palace without staying any longer. "The opportunity hasn't come yet, let me let you live for a few days first. This formation has the power to directly kill immortal sovereign realm experts, and all the control lies in Ji Kai's hands. Your Majesty, even if this is not true, don't be careless. After all, judging from demon race's temperament, there is indeed a possibility that he will send someone to assassinate him. Therefore, I feel that your Majesty should leave the palace quickly now and wait for the crisis to pass before returning." Appropriate. After listening to Chopin's words, Ji Kai frowned. He didn't want to leave the imperial city. Thinking of this, Ji Kai raised his eyes and looked at the two of them and replied, "This threatening aura is the palace formation of the great Zhou immortal dynasty. And today is destined to be a sleepless night in the palace, with the footsteps of the imperial guard everywhere, and many of the suspicious people have been imprisoned. Damn it, you're lucky, I'll spare your life today, but I will take your life sometime later, hum." Hearing this, Qin Feng looked without any worry at all and said, "These people can spread rumors as they please. When the guy is caught, they will be directly charged with helping others. That way, no, that's fine, don't worry about it at all. As long as he dares to make any move now, the formation will hit him directly without hesitation." Xianming fallen immortal formation. Haiying couldn't help but regret a little. If he had directly unleashed a fatal blow on Ji Kai, who had relaxed his vigilance before the two of them arrived, nothing would have happened. Hearing this, Chopin shook his head and said resolutely, "Your Majesty, We don't know the strong man demon race sent to assassinate him, nor do we know his strength. What if he gives your majesty a fatal blow when he relaxes his vigilance? What should we do if we attack that? Can his majesty guarantee that he can react quickly and use formations to block it? They said that no one came to assassinate them. What the four people from Profound Heaven Sect said was complete nonsense. Immediately, the shadow disappeared into the darkness. Xiao Bang looked at Qin Feng and talked about everything that was done in the palace today. As if he thought of something again, he looked at Guang Long aside and ordered, "General Guang, immediately mobilize the imperial army to conduct a thorough investigation for this emperor to see if there is any suspicious person in the palace. If there is any suspicious person, no matter what his identity is, capture him directly. After thoroughly inspecting the palace, we can directly inspect the entire imperial capital. This will be safer." Inside the general's mansion in the imperial capital. Hearing this, Huanglong nodded heavily and replied, "Your Majesty, don't worry, as long as I'm here, no matter how strong that demon race man is, I will definitely stand in front of you and won't let him hurt your Majesty in the slightest. Because there are too many people in the palace. If someone is hiding among some palace maids or looking for an opportunity among the soldiers to assassinate His Majesty, the situation will be very serious." After hearing this, Chopin nodded solemnly and said, "As the Prime Minister of the immortal dynasty of the Great Zhou dynasty, I will naturally not let down my guard, but what I am afraid of now is the nonsense of those rebellious ministers. After all, their power is very powerful. Being so powerful will cause a large group of people to spread rumors about him." The shadows all watched this scene, but they didn't take it seriously, and there was no trace of panic at all. When the black shadow in the dark heard this, his eyes lit up, he was a little confused, and said secretly, "The master of Profound Heaven Sect. Which force is this? And how did this force know that demon race was going to assassinate Jikai? Okay, as long as General Guang has this intention." This, Jikai's face showed a hint of hesitation. Taking this opportunity, Luo Binglan behind him also spoke to comfort him, "Your Majesty, I also think what Prime Minister Xiao said is reasonable. In case that demon race expert takes advantage of your Majesty's, what should I do if I give His Majesty a fatal blow when I'm not paying attention? So I think your Majesty should listen to Prime Minister Xiao and evacuate the palace first." The Black Shadow frowned, lost in thought, and did not take action immediately because he felt a threatening aura coming from nearby. 6 Daoist shadows sit cross-legged with each other here. And now the entire imperial capital is indeed as Chopin said. Some people and ministers are beginning to be dissatisfied with this and spreading rumors everywhere. I think this matter is irrelevant, so what if he, a strong demon race guy, comes to assassinate me? Is it possible that I am still afraid of him? Huh. Don't forget, there are formations in the palace. Chopin felt the same way and nodded. But now because of what the two said, Jikai has begun to become vigilant, and the power of the formation has also gathered here. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 272. After all, the careful searches carried out by the large-scale imperial army did affect the business of some ministers. Every time people searched, they would think that this store had committed some crime, and they would leave the place quickly without even asking a question. Then he went back and said, "What crime did this shop commit? Please don't go there or anything." If you say this, many people will believe it, so many people will not come here. Over the course of a whole day, these stores lost hundreds of thousands of high-grade immortal crystals in an instant. Who wouldn't be heartbroken by this? So this group of people has become anxious. At this time, Jikai was in the palace of Nanwang. Looking at Nanwang Haimin sitting in front of him, Jikai couldn't help but express the doubts in his heart. "Uncle Emperor, are you trying to deceive the Emperor about the assassination of Profound Heaven Sect?" Or are you trying to take advantage of it to steal resources? Hearing this, Ji Feng shook his head, poured a cup of tea for Ji Kai across from him, and said, "This is completely impossible. Your Majesty, you have to believe in the people of Profound Heaven section. They will not lie to you for no reason. Besides, don't forget that in that battle between good and evil, they rescued General Guanglong. This alone is enough to understand how these people behave. And I also believe that this demon race is really waiting for an opportunity. Maybe now, he is secretly monitoring the conversation between the two of us." Seeing this, Ji Kai drank the tea in the cup, his eyes showed contemplation, and he didn't say much. At this time, the strong demon race did not monitor the two of them, but was located in a cave far away from the imperial capital. Opposite him, there was a man wearing a black robe. It seemed that the two knew each other. What? The Blood Dragon, the most majestic demon race's #1 demon general, dare not attack because of the formation of Dazhu Immortal Dynasty. Hearing the black-robed man's taunt, the Blood Dragon just glanced at him without paying any attention. Although the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty is not ranked first-rate in terms of strength, his formations are comparable to the first-rate. If I rush up there rashly, it will be the same as death. What's more, the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty is also a strong man with the 9th layer of the Immortal King realm. I don't even know if it has broken through to the Immortal Sovereign realm. Having said this, the Blood Dragon glanced at the man in black robe opposite him again, and sneered coldly, "Do you think everyone is like you? Just rush forward without thinking? Huh. You can only bully some third-rate forces, right? Don't you remember what the Demon Lord taught you?" Hearing this, the man in black robe instantly turned pale and snorted coldly, "So you are cowardly." Hearing this, the Blood Dragon smiled, looking at the man in black robe with his blood-red eyes, and said playfully, "You said I am timid, then I will leave this task to you. Since you say you are strong, then I want to see how strong you are. Just in time, I'm here to learn too." And every task assigned to Blood Dragon, he would solve it perfectly. Because he was worried that demon race would assassinate him all day long, Ji Kai couldn't sleep well and suffered from dark circles under his eyes. It was okay for a short time, but he really couldn't stand it for a long time. Later, he tried not to worry about the assassination and just sleeping, only to find that no one came to assassinate him. At this time, Ji Kai was a little irritable. It was because of the Blood Dragon's calmness that the Demon Lord entrusted this task to his hands. When Cho Bang heard this, he felt helpless and could only do this. Seeing that the four of them seemed to be preparing to resist, the middle-aged general snorted coldly and said, "Don't even think about resisting, because sooner or later you will be in open-air jail today." Seeing this scene, the Blood Dragon shook his head, looking towards the imperial capital not far away filled with flames, and fell into deep thought. This formation is similar to the time wheel formation he suffered that day, except that this formation will only restrict your actions and will not absorb your cultivation. Then, without any surprise, the four of them were pressed into the sky prison and locked tightly by hundreds of chains injected with lightning, leaving no chance for them to escape. Inside the general's mansion in the imperial capital, the formation was activated, and the four of them suddenly felt that they could not move. They had been firmly suppressed by the formation and could not resist at all, as if everything on them was completely restricted. Guanglong and Xiao Bang looked at Qin Xian and the others with a hint of suspicion in their eyes. It has been half a month since the news first came out, but Demon Race seems to have not appeared at all, not even a shadow can be seen. Now people are spreading rumors that you Profound Heaven sect are a group of rumor mongers. A bunch of harmful people. They are just mortals. Do I still need to seek their opinions on what mortals say? The Blood Dragon has not made any move, as if waiting for an opportunity. The two of us can't make any moves now. We'll wait until we find an opportunity to rescue them, otherwise we will also be implicated. I saw hundreds of soldiers kicking open the door and looking at Qin Feng and the others with hostility. But the man in black robe avoided the blood dragon's gaze and simply pretended not to hear. According to His Majesty's order, you have made all the ministers panic by your nonsense. Now the people are becoming more and more malicious towards you, so I am here to arrest you who are spreading rumors, and you will be executed later. Seeing this, Chopin wanted to admonish him, but before he could speak, Guanglong on the side grabbed him and shook his head at him. But Mo Chen beside him had a hint of killing intent flashing in his eyes. This made Ji Kai somewhat doubt the accuracy of the Profound Heaven Sect news. During this time period, there was no demon race coming to assassinate him, which made Ji Kai even more sure of his thoughts. As for Gong Mo and Fang Gu, it didn't matter, because they didn't take the people in front of them seriously at all. But Chopin didn't mean that. Just when he was about to say something, there was a burst of noisy footsteps outside the general's mansion. If they want to expel us, we will naturally leave. Guanglong on the side clenched his fists when he saw this scene, and then sighed. He had nothing to do. The news is naturally true. I still say the same thing. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. If you don't believe it, I have nothing to say. Then a middle-aged man wearing armor and dressed as a general came to the four of them and said sternly. Then Ji Kai stopped paying attention to the advice of the Prime Minister and the general. With the support of all ministers, he reorganized the government affairs and continued like this day after day. Hearing this, Qin Feng frowned, but his expression remained cold and he didn't move at all. After hearing this, Qin Feng's expression remained unchanged. He poured himself a cup of tea, drank it, and said. This silent battle lasted for half a month. As soon as he finished speaking, several figures of old men appeared in the sky. The next moment, several old men chanted some spells. Within a few breaths, a formation completely surrounded the entire general's mansion. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 273. Mo Chen originally wanted to resist, but the formation had completely suppressed him, making him unable to move at all. Of course, Fang Gu and Gong Mo behind him actually had a way to leave, but Qin Feng sent a message from the dark, telling them not to make any moves yet. When the two heard this, they could only give up. In the following days, government affairs were held again and again. In the end, Ji Kai still did not wait for the assassination of demon race. The complaints among the people became less and less until they disappeared, but some people were still scolding the four people of Profound Heaven Sect. The blazing sun has disappeared, replaced by the moon hanging high in the sky. The moonlight shines on the sky prison, as if the four people trapped inside are covered with a mysterious veil. In the prison, Qin Feng's expression remained unchanged as he was bound by chains. If he wanted to escape, he could have escaped long ago. But unfortunately, this mission is to help Dazu Immortal Dynasty resist demon race's assassination. Otherwise, Qin Feng would have thrown away his sleeves and left, and how would he have suffered such a crime? At this time, several soldiers who were guarding the four people were drinking and eating meat outside, bragging and laughing. Little did they know, a Daoist figure was watching them coldly. When several soldiers were drunk, the figure suddenly appeared in front of the four of them. The four of them fainted before they noticed anything. Then, the figure took the key from their hands, came to the sky prison where the four people were bound, and untied their chains one by one. And the moonlight outside the house accidentally illuminated the face of the black shadow, who was Guanglong. After untying the chains, Guanglong showed a hint of apology to the four of them. I'm sorry, everyone, this is my fault. I hope you won't blame His Majesty for this. He is the king of a country and needs to pay attention to state affairs. Upon hearing this, Qin Feng waved his hands expressionlessly and said. It's nothing, I understand, but I believe that the demon race strongmen should be preparing to assassinate today. What? Hearing this, Guanglong was heartbroken and said in a panic, then should we rush there as soon as possible? Qin Feng shook his head, it's too late. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge roar came from the palace. The sound shook the sky and woke up all the civilians living in the imperial capital. High in the sky, a man wearing black armor and carrying two swords stood there. His eyes were cold. This man was the blood dragon. The next moment, the blood dragon waved his hand. In an instant, the sky was filled with flames, and hundreds of fireballs fell from the sky, falling to the ground like shining stars. Boom! 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 Ah! Countless screams came from the palace, and a large number of forbidden troops were hit by fireballs. Seeing this scene, Swilong pulled out the two swords from his back and rushed into Ji Kai's bedroom without hesitation. Ji Kai, who had just woken up, did not react at all and could only rely on instinct to dodge to the left. Even so, the knife still hit his arm. Ah! Ji Kai was in pain and accidentally fell under the bed. Seeing this scene, Swilong sneered and didn't give him a chance. A dark flame emerged from the knife in his hand. The next moment, Swilong aimed the knife at Ji Kai's neck and swung it down. Seeing this scene, Ji Kai showed a trace of despair, but when he was about to die, Luo Binglan, who was lying on the dragon bed, quickly got up and came to Ji Kai's body as quickly as possible, and then blocked it with his own body. This fatal blow. Phew! Luo Binglan's pupils shrank and her beautiful eyes began to dim. She used her last strength to turn her head and glance at Ji Kai behind her, then spit out a mouthful of blood and fell into a pool of blood. There was no movement at all. Ji Kai, who was lying on the ground, looked stunned when he saw this scene, with a hint of disbelief in his eyes. Then tears appeared. No. Binglan. Ji Kai held Luo Binglan's hand with his hand and found that it was gone. Instead of the gentle feeling before, there was only an abyss of coldness. Ji Kai cried bitterly and touched Luo Binglan's face with his hands. Why? Ah! Ji Kai's voice gradually became hoarse until she could no longer make a sound, because the ultimate point of grief is silence. Silent sadness is the most painful. The blood dragon who was before him looked at the scene and smiled coldly. His eyes were cold and there was no emotion at all. A wise king? Humph, it's really ridiculous. The blood dragon made a mocking sound, but then squatted down, looked at the silent Ji Kai and said. Actually, I'm still a little confused. Why would this profound heaven sect know that demon race is coming to assassinate you? Otherwise, you would have died under my knife half a month ago. Oh, you had it? I have a chance to survive, but I can only blame you. Hearing this, Ji Kai regretted for a while, closed her eyes, and prepared to welcome the arrival of death. The formation could no longer be touched because she couldn't react at all. Seeing this scene, the blood dragon's blood-red eyes moved, and without any hesitation, he raised his knife and chopped off. Clang! Unfortunately, a figure has already blocked this fatal knife. I saw that the person who came had a vicissitudes of life, with white hair, wearing a white robe, a pair of cloudy eyes, and his own temperament, making him look like an ethereal immortal. Looking at the person in front of him, the blood dragon's pupils shrank. When he realized who the person in front of him was, he gritted his teeth and said, Jigu, the previous generation emperor of the immortal dynasty of Great Zhou dynasty, I didn't expect that you are not dead yet, and you even broke through to the immortal sovereign territory. Hearing this, Ji Gugu smiled and said calmly. How could I die? But you are too presumptuous. You dared to break into the palace of immortal dynasty of Great Zhou dynasty and assassinate me. You even almost killed my descendants. Huh. Let me see if I don't kill you here today and let your demon race fall. Lose face. Hearing this, the blood dragon looked disdainful, sneered, and raised the knife in his hand. The next moment, a dark voice spread throughout the palace. I saw a terrifying power of law appearing in the body of the blood dragon. Let's taste my dark law first. The blood dragon laughed ferociously, and the two swords in his hand suddenly merged into a huge sword, and a terrifying aura emerged. The next moment, the blood dragon flew into the sky and fired a 100-meter blade at Jigu below. Boom! Seeing the incoming attack, Jigu didn't panic at all. The sword in his hand kept dancing, leaving after images in the air. Swish! Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 274. Jigu's every sword release was extremely subtle. When it reached a certain stage, his expression condensed and there was a bang. Black holes of nothingness suddenly appeared behind Jigu, and an extremely tearing space breath came from them. Click, click, click. This is the law of space that Jigu specializes in. The next moment, an extreme force of space gathered on the long sword in Jigu's hand, buzzing. Then he slashed towards the incoming move. Boom! The two attacks converged in mid-air, and in an instant, they began to collide with a bang. Click! The void collapsed, and the sound of tearing space spread throughout the imperial capital. Everyone was shocked by the scene and froze on the spot. The nearby palace was instantly destroyed by the two's offensive, turning a 10-mile radius into ruins. The remaining two kings in the imperial capital heard this momentum and quickly led their men over. This battle in the immortal sovereign realm is not something we can interfere with. Nanwang Jifen, who had just entered the palace, saw the scene and shook his head. Their strength is only at the immortal king level, and they are completely unable to intervene in this kind of immortal sovereign level fight. They can only watch the scene closely, hoping to help Jigu at the last moment. Boom! 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 Then the two figures began to fight again, and the two turned into a stream of light, constantly colliding in the air. In just a few breaths of time, they had already fought thousands of rounds. The sound of breaking the space and the sound of the shattering void coming from time to time. Such a sound made everyone in the imperial capital sting their ears and become dizzy. Some people were even shocked to death by the sound. High in the air, Jigu looked at the blood dragon not far away and couldn't help but make a mocking sound. Blood dragon, why are your laws of darkness getting worse and worse? Your strength is not as strong as it used to be. Is it possible that you have been fishing in troubled waters these years? Hearing this, the blood dragon did not speak, but gave him a cold look. Then he shouted, "Transformation!" Boom! The armor on the blood dragon suddenly burst, and a bloody light enveloped his body, seeming to be injecting some energy. The next moment, a devil with 100 wings and a ghost face and fangs appeared in front of Jigu. The blood dragon made an evil cry, and the sound stung Jigu's ears. The blood dragon's eyes moved, and the mouth full of fangs suddenly spit out a stream of blazing fire. Bah! Sparks filled the sky, and the raging fire turned directly into several 100-meter fireballs, and then rushed towards Jigu. The fireballs were like fire dragons one after another, and the scene was very scary. Seeing this scene, Jigu snorted coldly. How could he be afraid? The reason why the demon race is more difficult to deal with is because they have the ability to transform into their own bodies, and they also have a special physique. The two collided, creating a huge sound in mid-air. If you push me into a hurry, believe it or not, I will ask the strong men from the human race temple to come here right now. A large plume of dust and smoke dispersed, and Jigu, who was lying in the ruins, spit out a mouthful of blood and walked out in a state of embarrassment. Jigu, you are no match for me. I will give you a chance now to hand over Jikai. As long as you hand him over, I will be merciful and spare your life. Otherwise, I will immediately let you go to Immortal Dynasty. The entire foundation was destroyed today. However, not all demon races have the opportunity to transform into their true form. They must have the strength to reach the Immortal King level. But the battle wasn't over yet. The blood dragon turned into a demon and directly raised its sky-like fist and struck Jigu without hesitation. When the nearby Imperial guards heard this sound, they all died from splitting headaches. Boom! Jigu had broken through to the Immortal Sovereign Realm a few years ago, but was still defeated by the blood dragon. The blood dragon's current strength has reached the Immortal Sovereign third layer. As a first layer, it is difficult for him to win. But now, the blood dragon is in the place of the human race. If the strong men of the human race temple know about it, he will not be able to leave. Once transformed into the real body, one's own strength can be 10 times stronger, making it easy to fight across levels. The ground was directly knocked down 10 meters, and many buildings in the palace fell down at this moment. Jigu didn't come over and was directly punched to the ground. Immediately, the blood dragon raised his arm and threw the dark black fireball in his hand into the sky. In an instant, the sky became dark, lightning and thunder roared, and a violent storm swept across the earth, causing a panic among the civilians. Jigu looked heartbroken, but there was nothing he could do. So don't waste your breath here. I know about demon race's conspiracy, but I'm just too lazy to talk about it. Hearing this, Jigu exhaled and sneered. He looked at the blood dragon with a pair of cloudy eyes and snorted, "Are you threatening me?" Humph. He naturally knows what kind of force the Daoist clan's temple is. It is a place where the most elites of all races gather, similar to the demon palace behind him. Hearing this, the blood dragon's eyes showed a hint of murderous intent. Looking at the giant great demon head in the sky, Jigu took a breath and kept thinking about how to defeat him. Besides, I'm not so stupid as to sacrifice my own people to protect the great Zhou Immortal Dynasty. This Immortal Dynasty was just created casually by our ancestors back then. However, thinking of the task assigned to him by the Demon Lord, the blood dragon's eyes showed a hint of determination without any fear at all. He raised his eyes and looked at Jigu and said sternly, "After all, it takes a lot of power to transform into one's true form. If you don't have that power and you have to forcibly transform into one's true form, it's no different from self-destruction. Not to mention that the current blood dragon has transformed into its true form." In mid-air, the blood dragon looked down at Jigu's figure, with a smile on his terrifying face. After a long time, the originally dark sky began to flicker with streaks of fire, and the next moment, countless fireballs fell from the sky. "But before they come, I'll get rid of you first." As soon as he finished speaking, Swilong's aura exploded, and a large amount of immortal energy gathered in his body. The next moment, a large dark black fireball appeared on Swilong's hand. Without hesitation, he raised the sword in his hand and started to dance. In an instant, black holes in the space appeared one after another. The next moment, a roar echoed through the sky. "I'm afraid that even if I hand over Jikai to you, the great Zhou Immortal Dynasty will still be destroyed. Don't think that I don't know your demon race habits. You are no different from a robber." I saw that the sword in Jigu's hand had turned into a giant python. The giant python opened its ferocious mouth, pointed at the fire dragon in front of it, and rushed forward without hesitation. Boom! The aura coming out of it is terrifying and frightening. This is what the blood dragon created by gathering all its magic power. It is powerful enough to kill a strong man in the 5th layer of the Immortal Sovereign Realm instantly. If you dare, just call me. Do you really think I will be afraid? Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 275. It was like a swarm of meteors falling to the ground. The terrifying power shook the whole world, and your void shook for a while. When Jigu below saw this scene, the pressure in his heart doubled, and one law after another flashed in his hand. Jigu is hesitant now. He knows that with his current strength, it will be very difficult to resist the blood dragon's offensive this time. Even impossible. Jigu just said that the human temple was just to scare the blood dragon. Qin Feng, who was in the sky prison, saw this scene. His eyes flickered slightly, knowing that he could not wait any longer. He moved and appeared in front of Ji Kai in the palace. Seeing Ji Kai's grief-stricken expression, Qin Feng turned a blind eye. He had said everything he needed to say before, and he could only blame himself whether he listened or not. Then he raised his eyes to look at the two people in the sky. His expressions condensed, and the next moment, Qin Feng's domain of destruction was directly unleashed. Boom! The powerful pressure rushed towards the blood dragon high in the sky. The blood dragon's pupils shrank and he clenched his fists, suddenly realizing that his strength had declined. What's going on? How come my strength dropped to Immortal King? The blood dragon frowned and couldn't help but look at his body. As if he noticed something, his eyes moved and his gaze turned to Qin Feng, who was in front of Ji Kai. It's you. The blood dragon looked at Qin Feng with bared teeth and said angrily, then a hint of surprise appeared on his face, and he said in surprise. But what I didn't expect is that you actually have a field, and the ability in this field is very powerful. The human race has another genius. When Jigu below heard the words, his face showed a hint of shock, but then he thought of something. Taking advantage of the gap when the blood dragon didn't notice him, Jigu clenched the sword in his hand and poured all his mana into it. The next moment, a terrifying aura emerged from the sword, like an angry tiger. The sword slashed through the shattering void sky, and countless forces of space law rushed towards the blood dragon high in the sky. And the dark black fireball that landed in front of us was completely destroyed from this moment on, causing a burst of explosions. The blood dragon at high altitude looked at the attacking move. A sense of danger flashed in his heart, and his body immediately retreated sharply. Unfortunately, how could Jigu give him a chance? Inject all the newly recovered mana into the sword body again. Then with a sharp look, he aimed at the blood dragon high in the sky and slashed at it. Wow! The surging sword energy was like a long river, rushing towards the blood dragon with an unstoppable momentum, as if it wanted to give him a fatal blow. The piercing sound of the void made the blood dragon feel a little uncomfortable. He began to have a splitting headache and his eyes felt dizzy. But he still gritted his teeth and held on. Unfortunately, at this time, the sword energy had already arrived in front of him. Seeing this, the blood dragon looked shocked and shouted, "Oops! His current realm has dropped to the Immortal King realm, and he cannot resist this move at all." But at this moment, a figure of a man in black robe suddenly appeared in front of the blood dragon. Seeing the blood dragon's somewhat panicked look, the man in black robe curled his lips, crossed his hands across his chest, and couldn't help but taunted, "What? After so many days of planning, the final result is still a failure. So you should listen to me and use absolute strength to annihilate them. Why is there any need to make calculations?" Then, the man in black robe looked at the incoming move with a calm expression, snorted coldly, and a sharp claw appeared in his hand. He moved his left hand and swung it directly at the incoming move. Click! The offensive collapsed instantly after being struck by the black-robed man's claw. The man in black robe did not think about counterattack. He just glanced coldly at Qin Feng below, knowing that Ji Kai could not assassinate him, and then prepared to pull the blood dragon away. But at this moment, a terrifying golden dragon appeared high in the sky, roared, and then rushed towards the two of them. The two of them were caught off guard and were directly blasted to the ground. It hit the ruins of a palace. One move was exactly what Ji Kai used the formation to release. At this moment, Ji Kai beside Qin Feng had already stood up, with absolutely cold eyes. At this moment, he was exuding a monstrous murderous intention, like a living god of murder. Ji Kai looked at the ruins not far away with a cold face and walked over. With every step they took, the two people in the ruins felt a sense of crisis. I want you to be buried with Binglan. After the words fell, Ji Kai controlled the palace's formation and unleashed the final blow on the two of them. Boom! The figures of 6 golden dragons appeared in the sky, and a pair of golden pupils looked down at the ground, as if looking at a dead person. At this time, Ji Kai has changed from a prey to a hunter. No, it seems we have to use that thing. Seeing this scene, the man in black robe was shocked, knowing that things had reached an uncontrollable point. As soon as he gritted his teeth, a halo appeared in the hand of the man in black robe, and then he put it on the ground. The next moment, a black hole appeared in the two figures. The man in black robe did not hesitate and pulled the blood dragon beside him and walked in. At this time, the 6 golden dragons rushed towards the place where the two disappeared just now. Boom! A huge hole was directly knocked out of the ground, but unfortunately there was no trace of the two of them. Seeing this scene, Ji Kai clenched his fists and looked extremely unwilling. Then he shook his head and sighed, after all, I didn't kill these two guys. Binglan, I'm sorry for you. At the same time, Qin Xian, who was in profound heaven sect, heard the voice of the system in his mind. Ding, congratulations to the host for completing the mission obtained, Ancient Demon Dragon Body, Juvenile Demon Dragon, System Value of 30,000, and a Rank 5 Mortal Immortal Jade Bead. Upon hearing this, Qin Xian's cold face showed a smile, and then he opened the sky-breaking mirror and saw the scene in the palace. At this time, Prime Minister Xiao Bang and Guanglong also arrived here, and the two kings also led many powerful people to come closer. Looking at the ruins and dilapidated scenes all over the ground, Nanwang Jiafeng couldn't help but sigh, then shook his head and sighed. If I had known this, why did I do it in the first place? Hearing this, Qi Wangji Huoshen on the side hesitated and didn't know what to say. Then the two kings came to Ji Kai. At this time, Ji Kai looked a little lonely and vicissitudes of life. More than half of his black hair had turned white. It was enough to see how much Luo Binglan's death had affected him. The two kings looked at each other and did not speak to comfort, but stood there quietly. What Ji Kai needed now was to calm down. Guanglong and Chopin on the side naturally understood this. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 276. Not far away, Jigu, who had finished fighting the blood dragon, also came over. At this time, he saw that his snow-white robe was in tatters and he even looked a little embarrassed. Even so, it could not stop the arrogance exuding from him. Human spirit. Jigu walked up to Ji Kai, looked at this scene, and sighed. He had also experienced the death of his beloved. Because of this incident, he even resigned from the throne. Jigu shook his head, patted Ji Kai's shoulder, and comforted him, Okay Kai, people cannot be resurrected after death. You have to be more relaxed. After all, you are the emperor of the great Zhou immortal dynasty. If you give up, the country would probably laugh at you if they knew you showed up like this for a woman. Hearing this, Ji Kai looked up at Jigu and said nothing, but shed painful tears. How could he let go of his beloved elder sister? Not far away, a female voice came over. Everyone looked up when they heard the sound. I saw a woman wearing a purple flowing cloud dress, standing tall and graceful, walking over quickly, with a slightly anxious expression. Ji Kai heard this voice and knew who was coming. It was Luo Binglan's younger sister, Luo Bingning. Thinking of this, Ji Kai's face was filled with mixed emotions, and he didn't know how to explain it to Luo Bingling later. Seeing Luo Bingling lying in a pool of blood without any breath, Luo Bingling was slightly stunned. She looked at the scene with disbelief and said incoherently. This, sister, she, What's wrong with her? The people around him didn't say anything when they heard this, and they all lowered their heads. Seeing this scene, Luo Bingning's beautiful eyes looked at Ji Kai, who said nothing, with a hint of questioning in his eyes. Your Majesty, how could my sister die? Hearing this, Ji Kai sighed, with a hint of apology on his face, and shook his head. Blame me, it was me who killed your sister. It was me who refused to listen to dissuasion and insisted on going to court. It was me. Luo Bingning didn't speak, but her eyes were filled with tears. Then she closed her eyes, and the tears fell across her cheeks and fell to the ground. From now on, Luo Bingning already knows that she no longer has a sister, nor does she have any relatives in this world. She and her sister have been dependent on each other since childhood. Just by luck, her sister was accidentally spotted by the young Ji Kai, and she instantly rose from a low-class person to a noble. Despite this, Luo Bingning has never been happy. Her happiness and joy come from her sister. She would rather have his sister than this wealth. Luo Bingning likes to live a carefree life. But I also checked a lot of ancient books and found that there is a secret technique in the world that can bring the dead back to life. It is said that as long as one person gives everything he has, he can save another person. There is no secret. These are all lies. Now he no longer values power, but wants to beg God to bring Luo Binglan back to life. Seeing this scene, Qin Feng shook his head and said calmly. Qin Feng frowned and turned to look at the person behind him. I know, this is all my fault. Anyway, my mission is completed, and it's time to leave. They all shook their heads again, looked at Ji and said consolingly. If you don't believe it, then there's nothing I can do. Even big forces like the Demon Palace and the Human Temple don't have a way to resurrect themselves. How can a profound heaven sect, which was born just a short time ago, possibly have one? Ji Kai kowtowed heavily to the ground several times, completely disregarding his face as the leader of a country. The people on the side were a little in disbelief when they saw this scene. When Qin Feng saw this scene, his expression remained unmoved. He looked around and found that Gong Mo and the other three had also arrived. So, I believe that with your Sect's ability, you will definitely know this secret technique. So I am begging you here to save Luo Lan. Even so, the two of them also showed a trace of curiosity, and couldn't help but look at Qin Feng. After all, Qin Xian was indeed very mysterious in their hearts, and he might actually have a way to be resurrected. His mission has been completed, and the two have nothing to do with each other. What's more, Ji Kai has done those things to Qin Feng and the others before. Based on this, Qin Xian will definitely not give it. Hearing this, Ji Kai was speechless. He knew that it would be very embarrassing for him to do so, but he suddenly discovered that since Binglan's death, he no longer paid attention to his own face. Not to mention such things as power. Is this still the domineering and majestic emperor? Thinking of this, Qin Feng glanced at the three people behind him and walked out. Suddenly, his foot was pulled hard. I wonder if this little brother can bring Binglan back to life? As long as there is a way, I am willing to pay any price, even my life. I saw Ji Kai kneeling down to him and making a pleading voice despite everyone's dissuasion. Hearing this, Ji Kai lost consciousness for a while and knelt on the ground, staring blankly. He found out that it was Ji Kai, the emperor of the great Zhou immortal dynasty. Seeing this, Qin Feng was a little confused, but he seemed to have guessed something. In the end, Qin Feng left the place with the remaining three people without stopping, leaving everyone looking at each other in confusion. Qin Xian, who was in the profound heaven sect hall, looked at the scene and didn't say anything. Even if he had, he wouldn't give it away so easily. After all, Qin Xian is a person who values interests. Your Majesty, you have to be more open-minded. How can there be a method of resurrection in the world? If it really existed, shouldn't those who died have come back to life long ago? Unless the great Zhou immortal dynasty is his own force, it is almost the same. Qin Xian has always been generous to those in his own power. Unless Luo Binglan comes back to life, face and other things are no longer important to Ji Kai. Hearing this, Qin Feng glanced at him lightly, shook his head, and replied, "No, there is no way to resurrect in this world. If you die, you will die. You didn't listen to what I said before, and now you regret it again. What's the use?" Hearing this, Ji Kai nodded repeatedly, knowing that everything was to be blamed on himself. Gong Mo and Fang Gu on the side heard this and their eyes moved slightly. They also knew about this secretary, but according to rumors, this secretary was fake and just a rumor. His legs went weak and he collapsed on the ground. He bit his lower lip tightly. Looking at Luo Binglan who was silent in front of him, Luo Bingning's tears couldn't stop flowing down. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 277. If he could, he would give everything he had. Although Ji Kai didn't care about his face, the other two kings wanted to protect his majesty and kept trying to pull him up, but unfortunately they were all thrown away by Ji Kai. After being thrown away again and again, the second king was helpless and could only stand quietly and watch. This time, the royal family's face was completely lost. The same goes for Luo Bingning on the side. What would happen if the person you love the most and the person you are closest to suddenly disappears from the world? This is a very painful thing, and you may even have thoughts of committing suicide, as Luo Bingning does now. If she is not given hope, Luo Bingning may commit suicide in a few days. Guanglong on the side couldn't stand it any longer. He gritted his teeth, walked to Ji Kai and said, "Your Majesty, if you insist on doing this, you might as well ask for the Profound Heaven Sect. We can't guess the mystery of Profound Heaven Sect, and we don't know how powerful it is. But since it can get the news from demon race, it means that this force must have its differences. Maybe it is there really a way to be resurrected. Your Majesty is kneeling here today, why not go directly to Profound Heaven Sect for help? What if Profound Heaven Sect shows mercy and gives you the secret method?" When Yanji's eyes flashed with a golden light, she thought for a moment, then staggered up from the ground, without any hesitation, looked at Guanglong and nodded heavily. "Okay, I'll go try and you lead the way." Hearing this, Guanglong showed a hint of joy on his face, nodded, and said, "As ordered." When Luo Bingning, who was kneeling on the ground, heard this, she also stood up, wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said, "I want to go too." Guanglong looked at her deeply and nodded. Afterwards, the three people disappeared here. No one tried to dissuade him. An hour later, the three figures appeared at Mangi Tomb. Inside the main hall of Profound Heaven Sect, Qin Xian sat on the throne, looked at the three people outside the image, shook his head, and said nothing. Know what they are going to do here. But Qin Xian is not a saint. On the contrary, he is very cold-blooded. But Ji Kai and Luo Bingning were very determined, and they also vaguely noticed that someone was watching them secretly. Then he knelt here. As soon as the situation continued, it lasted for nearly half a month. Until today, there was a tremor in the sky. A handsome man wearing Qingxian robes came out, and his eyes happened to catch sight of the three people below. And this person is Wu Su. Therefore, Wu Su didn't want to pay much attention to the scene until he saw Luo Bingning's figure. Luo Bingning was the woman in purple robe that day. He touched his eyes, as if he couldn't believe why she was here. Wu Su couldn't bear it and walked over immediately. Below. Feeling the unfamiliar aura approaching, Luo Bingning raised her beautiful eyes and found that Wu Su was actually the person who had peeped at her bathing before. Although she was a little confused as to why Wu Su appeared here, Luo Bingning didn't want to ask any more questions. She just wanted to beg Qin Xianneng for the method of resurrection. "Girl, why are you kneeling here? Are you looking for something? Wusu touched his head and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Luo Bingning just glanced at him and said nothing. Guanglong on the side saw Wusu frowning and thought that this man was here to please women, so he shouted loudly. Peak Master. Hearing these two words, Guanglong suddenly felt hopeful and touched Ji Kai beside him with his hand. Feeling the softness coming from behind, Wusu was stunned. I hope you can help me. I'm begging you. Wusu's figure appeared here. Having said this, Wusu seemed to remember what Guanglong said just now, looked at Ji Kai who was kneeling on the ground, and said coldly. Seeing Ji Kai kneeling down, Wusu was shocked. He had never seen such a scene before. He hurried over to help him up and said with some hesitation, I'm afraid this is not possible. Could it be that something happened to you? Something. You probably want me to save that woman, right? Luo Bingning's face showed a hint of pleading, as if she was longing for something. Such an appearance made Wusu's heart soften. After half a stick of incense, Wusu frowned. Don't you think you want to come here to beg our sect master? Seeing this, Wusu shook his head, as if he was very disappointed with Ji Kai, and then looked at Luo Bingning who was standing aside, with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. Are you a disciple of Profound Heaven Sect? Hearing the word sect master, Luo Bingning, who was silent at first, his eyes lit up and he asked quickly. Then he looked at Guanglong and shook his head and said. Inside the main hall of Profound Heaven Sect. Seeing this, Ji Kai seemed to understand something. He kowtowed heavily to Wusu without hesitation, and then pleaded. He himself didn't know if there was a method of resurrection, but based on his understanding of Qin Xian, maybe he really had such a thing. Seeing Luo Bingning's tearful expression, Wusu disappeared without any words. Luo Bingning buried her head in Wusu's back and said. The information our sect master told us is generally very accurate, but you didn't listen. Now you regret it, but you came to the sect master. Don't you think this is a bit excessive? Who are you? As long as you can save my sister, I am willing to do anything for you, even if it is too much, I will try my best to complete it. Hearing this, Wusu raised his eyebrows but did not reply to him. He seemed to have guessed something and looked at the three of them and said. Hearing this, Guanglong sighed and told Wusu the whole story. Hearing this, Wusu shook his head and replied, No, I am the peak master of a small peak in Profound Heaven Sect. But the reason for all this is also your fault. I wonder if my little brother can take us into the Profound Heaven section. I have something serious and I want to ask your sect leader for help. I don't know this. Hearing this, Ji Kai did not refute. He was very regretful now, but unfortunately he had no regrets at all. At this point, Luo Bingning's face turned red, but for the sake of her sister, she gritted her teeth and continued speaking. Just as he was about to leave, Luo Bingning, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly rushed over and hugged Wusu's back with both hands. Seeing this, Qin Xian, who was sitting first, didn't change his expression. He seemed to have guessed that he was coming here, and said calmly. But he finally shook off Luo Bingning. After thinking for a while, Wusu didn't say anything in the end. Having said that, it is impossible for Wusu to help Luo Bingning directly go to Qin Xian to plead for mercy just because he loves Luo Bingning. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 278. Hearing this, Wusu nodded and said, Sect Master, I want to ask you if there is any way to save that woman. Upon hearing this, Qin Xian did not answer immediately, but asked, Do you like her? Wusu was stunned by these words and lowered his head. He hesitated to speak, not knowing how to answer. Seeing this scene, Qin Xian continued, If you like her, then I will give the secret method to you as a wedding gift. If you don't like her, then the life and death of his family has nothing to do with us. After hearing this, Wusu pondered for a while. After a while, he looked at Qin Xian firmly and nodded, Sect Master, I like her. I don't know why I like her. Anyway, I just like her. Seeing this, Qin Xian looked at him deeply and said nothing. System, how to bring a dead person back. Ding, the host can check it by himself. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 panels appeared in front of Qin Xian. Resurrection grass, it has the ability to pull a person back from hell, but it has a side effect, that is, after resurrection, he, she, will lose all memory, including his or her own strength. Price, 2,500 system value. Resurrection pill, taking this pill can bring back your lost soul, but the chance of waking up is very small, as low as 1%. Price, 700 system value. Yin Yang Pearl, it has the ability to adjust yin and yang, and can resurrect a dying person, but it cannot see the sun, and after rebirth, it can only move for 1 hour a day. Price, 3,000 system value. Seeing this scene, Qin Xian also knew that there is no secret method of rebirth in the world. Even if there is, it is not the most perfect and will have flaws after all. Although the resurrection pill has the ability to bring the dead back to life, its chance is really small, as you can see from the 700 system value. Thinking of this, Qin Xian waved his hand, and the 3 people in Wangui tomb suddenly appeared in the hall. The 3 of them were a little confused until they saw Wusu and Qin Xian above the main hall and they immediately understood. Ji Kai and Luo Bining instantly knelt down and begged. Save Senior, save Binglin, sister, I'm willing to pay any price, even if I let you work like a cow or a horse. Guanglong on the side immediately knelt down after hearing this and said. Please Sect Master, please save our Empress of the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty. After hearing this, Qin Xian's expression did not change and he said calmly. I can save you, but what can you give? Don't tell me what to do with me, there are so many people who want to act like cattle or horses for me, and there is no shortage of you. Seeing this, the 3 of them looked at each other and fell into deep thought. After a few breaths, Luo Bingning stood up directly and said. The little girl is still a perfect person. If the senior doesn't dislike it, the little girl is willing to. Before Luo Bingning could continue, Qin Xian interrupted her. I'm not interested in your appearance, and I'm even less interested in your body. The only thing I'm interested in is whether you like Wusu. Hearing this, Luo Bingning was stunned, and couldn't help but look at Wusu who was in a daze at the side. He didn't answer immediately, or it could be said that he didn't know how to answer. But thinking of the previous scenes, Luo Bingning felt a trace of love in her heart, but this kind of love was very rare and could easily disappear if she didn't persist. Seeing this, Qin Xian said, I don't need you to pay anything, I just need a word from you. Are you interested in Wusu? If there is, then I will naturally support the marriage between you two. But on the other hand, if you don't, then just pretend that I didn't say what I just said. Hearing this, Luo Bingning thought for a long time. A quarter of an hour later, Luo Bingning looked at Qin Xian, then at Wusu, and nodded. Wusu on the side was very happy when he saw this scene, but he still calmed down immediately. Seeing this, Qin Xian didn't say anything, but looked at Ji Kai. And you? Hearing this, Ji Kai thought for a while and replied, I am willing to exchange all the resources of the entire Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty with you. Oh. Hearing this, Qin Xian raised his eyebrows. He really needed the resources, but they were still not enough. Ji Kai seemed to have guessed it and continued, I, the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty, am willing to surrender to Profound Heaven Section as long as Profound Heaven Sect says anything. I, the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty, will do whatever I want. Seeing this, Qin Xian finally had a smile on his face. This is what Qin Xian wants. Anyway, he didn't force him. This was Ji Kai's choice. But in order to show his sincerity, Qin Xian explained to the three people the methods of resurrection that he had just seen. After a few breaths, Ji Kai was stunned when he heard these words. Is it so difficult that there is no perfect way to resurrect? Qin Xian shook his head and replied, resurrection itself is something that goes against the will of heaven. There is no best of both worlds in this world. There is only the resurrection pill, but the chance of this is very low. You have to think clearly. This, Ji Kai's face showed a hint of hesitation. When Luo Bingning heard this, she said without hesitation. Senior, please ask for the yin-yang pearl. I don't want to gamble with my sister's life. Hearing this, Qin Xian looked at Ji Kai. Hearing this, Ji Kai could only nod his head, okay. Seeing this, Qin Xian directly bought the yin-yang pearl on the system mall. Then he looked at the two of them and said, corpse. Hearing this, the ring in Ji Kai's hand lit up. The next moment, a woman of unparalleled beauty appeared in the hall. Seeing the woman's face, Qin Xian had to sigh. She is indeed extremely beautiful. Immediately, the yin-yang pearl in her hand appeared on the woman's body. The next moment, a strong death aura came from Luo Binglan's body. Hoo hoo. A dark gust of wind swirled around Luo Binglan's body, seeming to summon spirits. After half a stick of incense, Luo Binglan's slender eyebrows moved. Seeing this scene, Ji Kai and Luo Bingning hurried over, shook Luo Binglan's body and shouted, Sister, Binglan. Hearing someone calling her, Luo Binglan sat up unsteadily, her dim eyes began to shine, and she could clearly see the two figures in front of her. Your Majesty, Xiaoning, what are you doing here? Luo Binglan looked a little confused, as if she thought of something, and looked at herself again. Didn't I die? Why did I come back to life again? Ji Kai did not reply to his words, but hugged him directly. Tears filled his eyes, filled with love. Ah, Your Majesty, what's wrong with you? Seeing Ji Kai's expression, Luo Binglan was a little confused, but she still enjoyed Ji Kai's hug. The beautiful eyes blinked and looked at Luo Bingning aside. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 279. Seeing this, Luo Bingning told her what happened one by one. Hearing this, Luo Binglan was stunned, and then looked around, only to find that she was in an unfamiliar hall. And he also saw Qin Xian sitting on the throne with an indifferent expression. Seeing a few people performing a scene of love and divorce, Qin Xian waved his hands impatiently. Are you kidding me? Okay, now that you are alive, don't make such a scene in my hall. Before they could say anything, the four figures disappeared into Tianqian Hall. At the same time, Demon Realm, inside the Demon Palace. The Demon Lord, wearing a black mysterious robe, sat on the throne, his blood-red eyes rolling constantly, as if he was meditating on something. There are two deist figures kneeling below, one of which is the Blood Dragon. Profound Heaven Sect? Power of the Realm. The Demon Lord raised his eyes and looked at the two people below. Are you sure it's the power of the field? After hearing this, the two men nodded and replied, Demon Lord, it is indeed the power of the domain. I dare not forget that power from now on. Seeing the movement of the Demon Lord's eyes, he nodded slightly, his originally indifferent face a little displeased. You can actually lower others to a higher level regardless of their level of cultivation. This in itself is a very threatening force. It can even threaten my demon palace. Having said this, the Demon Lord looked at the two of them and ordered, kill this guy in the cradle quickly before he rises, otherwise it will pose a major threat to my demon race's future plans. As if he felt something was wrong again, the Demon Lord continued to add. This time the fire dragon and the unicorn will follow you. You must carefully check where this force is stationed. Once discovered, you will destroy it immediately without hesitation. Do you understand? As you command, Demon Lord. After hearing this, the two nodded heavily, and then the figures disappeared from the place. After the two left, the Demon Lord looked into the void in the distance and murmured. Profound Heaven Sect, I really don't know what kind of force you are. Did you rise up? Or have you always been hidden in the world? 1 month later. Inside the main hall of Profound Heaven Sect. Qin Xian's figure is sitting on the throne, and below him, there are 6 figures standing, namely Gong Mo, Fang Gu, Qin Feng, Mo Chen, Yun Fenji, and Bloodthirsty. In the last mission, the 4 of them did not achieve any very good results, and only Qin Feng did better in that mission. Unfortunately, Qin Feng was his clone and already had a physique. Therefore, the ancient demonic dragon body was of no great use to him, and he did not give it to others, but chose to keep it. However, the task of resisting the Demon Lord has greatly increased the overall strength of Profound Heaven Sect. Because they control all the resources of the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty, the strength of all the elder peak masters of Profound Heaven Sect has now fully increased. The average cultivation level has reached the Earth Immortal realm. Even Qin Xian himself has reached true immortal, and the speed of this improvement is already very fast. Looking at the 6 figures below, Qin Xian stood with his hands behind his hands, looked down at the 6 people, and said in a deep voice. It has been a few months since we came to the 10 domains from Profound Heaven continent, and I, Profound Heaven Sect, rarely appear in front of the world because our overall strength is still too weak. Once we appear, we may be attacked by some blow from the forces. However, after this mission, the resources of the Great Zhou Immortal Dynasty are in our hands, and your strength has also increased sharply. Therefore, after careful consideration, we decided to recruit new blood, but it is not to open a large sect, but I'm asking you to go and recruit disciples. If you don't want to accept him as a disciple, then just recruit him into the sect. And you also have to set some requirements for accepting a disciple. You must test his understanding and character. If you don't have these two, you can't be recruited into the sect. Of course, I won't let you recruit disciples in vain. Whoever recruits a disciple with the best qualifications and character will be given the body of an ancient demon dragon as a reward. What do you think? Hearing this, I glanced at the 6 of them first, then nodded and solemnly said, I have no objection. Seeing this scene, Qin Xian nodded. Okay, I hope you won't disappoint me. Fly Immortal Domain, Fengzhou. The environment here is beautiful and the fairy atmosphere is rich. Once you stay here, you will feel happy. Han Chuang touched his chest with his hand. It was a blessing in disguise that I was rescued. Hearing this, the little girl hesitated for a while and replied. Uncle, wake up. What? Hearing this, Han Chuang was a little stunned. The little girl who stayed aside looked a little happy when she saw the strong man waking up. Then he cupped his fists at her and said, Little sister, thank you for saving me. Cough, cough. Then he breathed a sigh of relief, looked at the little girl and asked, I wonder where your sister is now. Hiss. Immediately, the figures of the 6 people disappeared into the hall. My sister is a pharmacist and often goes out to look for medicinal herbs. If nothing else, she should be on her way back now. He straightened up his aching body with force, touched his head and murmured, Where is this? He sighed slightly, knowing that in his situation, if there were no recovery pills to assist him, he would have to rest for at least half a year to fully recover. Hearing this, the little girl quickly shook her head, waved her hands and said. At this time, in the house, a strong man with a rough appearance and a Chinese character face was lying on a bed. The little girl was very patient and took half a stick of incense while giving the medicine. Hearing this, Han Chuang nodded and clenched his hands. I found that I couldn't use any of my magic power. A canyon filled with colorful flowers. This person was Han Chuang, who had fallen into the canyon. Han Chuang moved slightly and heard a violent cough. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the unfamiliar sights around him. The strong man's lips were white, and there was no trace of blood on his face. But this seems to be true. I saw the little girl holding a bowl of soup in her hand. Looking at the strong man's body, the little girl walked over gently, carefully picked up the spoon on the soup, and fed it to the strong man's mouth. Beside him, there was a cute little girl. Fuck Immortal Dynasty. Hearing this, Han Chuang looked at her and then at the white cloth on his body, and understood that she should be the one who saved him. It was found to be very painful and he had suffered very serious internal injuries. Was I picked up? No, 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 I didn't save you, my sister picked you up from the back mountain. In the farthest place of the entire flower valley, there is a small courtyard house built with fine cloud wood. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like I have no strength at all? Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 280. I couldn't help but look at the little girl on the side, thought for a while, and asked, "Little sister, do you have any elixir? It's the kind of elixir that can heal injuries." Pill. The little girl pouted, her cute face showing a hint of doubt, but after thinking about it for a long time, she still didn't know what this elixir was. Seeing this, Han Chuang sighed, "Forget it." Then he looked at the little girl and continued to ask, "By the way, what's your name?" Hearing this, the little girl's eyes narrowed into big moons, and her smile couldn't be more adorable. "My name is Su Xiao Xiao. What's your sister's name?" After hearing this, the little girl thought for a while again. This time she only thought about it for a few breaths before she came to her senses and replied. "My sister's name is Suminjio." Suminjio. Han Chuang murmured, "And I have to say that this name is quite nice. Then do you know where this place is now?" "Area." The little girl frowned and looked like she was thinking again, but this time, she thought about it for a long time and couldn't figure it out. There was a hint of apology on Han Chuang's cute expression. "I'm sorry, uncle, I don't know where this is. How about you ask my sister after she comes back? She might know." Han Chuang nodded and touched the little girl's head with his hand. That was all he could do. Half an hour later, a slight sound of footsteps came from outside the door. When the little girl staying in the room heard the voice, her big eyes shone with light, and then she walked out happily. "Sister, sister." "Yeah, Xiao Xiao." A woman's delicate voice came from outside the door. The voice was clear and melodious, which made Han Chuang in the room a little curious. Then, the woman pulled Su Xiao Xiao and walked in. If nothing else happened, this person was Su Minjiao. And Han Chuang also saw her appearance. Wearing a white-green dress, her hair draped over her shoulders like a waterfall, she turned her head slightly to reveal her warm jade-like skin. Her eyebrows are full and bright, her body is light, her waist is delicate, and she has a quiet and elegant fragrance from time to time. Such peerless beauty made Han Chuang stunned. Su Minjiao happened to also see his eyes, and her cheeks turned red. Seeing this, Han Chuang reacted immediately, knowing that he had lost his composure, scratched his head, and quickly began to apologize to Su Minjiao. "Well, girl, I'm sorry, I. Hearing this, Su Minjiao shook her head and showed a gentle smile. "It's okay, I don't mind." Hearing this, Han Chuang breathed a sigh of relief, but still cursed himself secretly. "Damn it, am I a human? How could I stare at others like that? It makes others feel embarrassed." After scolding, Han Chuang carefully got out of bed. "Why?" Seeing this scene, Su Minjiao on the side quickly walked over and said, "Your injury probably hasn't healed yet, so don't move yet." Smelling the fragrance that belonged to Su Minjiao, Han Chuang was stunned for a moment, a little embarrassed, and quickly waved his hands and said, "Well, I'm actually almost healed, and I don't need to lie down in bed." Then he immediately walked around Su Minjiao and was about to hold her hand. He leaned towards her and clasped his fists and said, "Thank you for taking care of me these days. I, Han Chuang, will definitely repay you in the future." Hearing this, Su Minjiao's face was stunned for a moment, but then a smile appeared on her face. She shook her head and said, "It's okay. I'm a medicine student. I saw you were seriously injured there. Since I'm a medicine man, how could I not save you until you die?" Speaking of this, Su Minjiao had a trace of doubt in her eyes, looked at Han Chuang and asked in a low voice, "By the way, you should be an immortal." Immortal? Hearing this, Han Chuang was stunned, but he still reacted, looked at Su Minjiao and nodded, "That's right." Hearing this, Su Minjiao glanced at him, said nothing, and walked out of the yard with Su Xiaoxiao beside her. She was going to prepare to clean up the herbs she picked up in the mountains today. Seeing this scene, Han Chuang scratched his head, and then walked out, looking around. "I found that this place is surrounded by mountains and is in a canyon full of trees, flowers, and grass." She couldn't help but look a little surprised, and then carefully looked at Su Minjiao's whole body with her eyes, and found that she did not show any fairy energy, and was immortal without any cultivation. Han Chuang frowned. It wasn't that he was afraid, but that it was a bit abnormal for a woman to live in such a remote canyon without anything happening and still survive. But he still hesitated to doubt or ask the woman. After all, others also saved his life. Then he looked at the woman's white and slender hands, cleaning a herb. Due to the cleaning, her hands were already covered with some soil. Seeing this scene, Han Chuang wanted to help, but he was afraid that he would damage the herbs again. After all, he had never done such detailed things, not to mention that these things were mortal things. Han Chuang used to be the lord of a city and experienced life and death battles. He could crush a boulder with just a little force, let alone this medicinal herb. Thinking of this, Han Chuang couldn't help but scratch his head, and suddenly found that his behavior was very strange today. He used to have a majestic face, but now he has a trace of complicated feelings in his heart when he sees Su Minjiao, but this kind of behavior is very strange. "I can't express my feelings." Despite this, Han Chuang still walked over with very light steps, for fear of disturbing Su Minjiao's work. But Su Minjiao seemed to have noticed his presence, raised her lips and smiled, but did not speak, but was busy cleaning up. Seeing Su Mingming's actions, Han Chuang struggled mentally for a while, and finally plucked up the courage to ask, "Miss Su, I want to ask where this is." Hearing this, Su Minjiao stopped what she was doing, turned her head, and looked at him with beautiful eyes. Their eyes also collided at this moment. Seeing this, Han Chuang couldn't help but take a step back, his heart pounding. Jump, this was the first time he felt this way. However, Su Minjiao didn't seem to notice this and replied, "This is the territory of Dakian Immortal Dynasty, and the place we are in now is called Dream Valley." "Fuck Immortal Dynasty." Hearing this, Han Chuang frowned. He naturally knew about this Immortal Dynasty. Dakian Immortal Dynasty and Dazhu Immortal Dynasty are mortal enemies. Both sides compete with each other for hegemony. A big war will occur almost every few years. I didn't expect that I would actually fall into the territory of Dagon Immortal Dynasty. Han Chuang murmured, and then asked Su Minjiao about his situation at that time. But Su Minjiao didn't know what it was, she just said a few words. Seeing this, Han Chuang nodded. Then he looked at Su Minjiao and asked out the doubt hidden in his heart. "By the way, Miss Su, as a woman living in this valley, won't you encounter any monsters?"